In the pouring rain, a guard in a green cloak patrolled the imperial palace, pondering an ominous warning to beware the silver wolf. He found a night watchman's rumors eerie when a sudden rustle from the woods stopped him in his tracks, and he called out, demanding to know who was there. A dark figure emerged from the woods, approaching with heavy footsteps. As the guard demanded to know their business, he recoiled in terror, his eyes widening in recognition of some horrifying feature on the approaching figure. As he backed away again, the shocking truth hit him as he realized the mysterious person was covered in blood. He raised his lantern with a trembling hand, illuminating the gruesome scene. In a lantern light, a blood-soaked, muscular man with light-colored hair appeared, standing expressionless in the downpour. The guard flinched in sudden recognition, realizing he knew exactly who this terrifying man was. A piercing scream shattered the silence of the forest night. The scene flashes back to a brightly lit throne room where, amidst applause, courtiers wished their king a happy birthday. Emperor Jan Valencia V sat on his throne with a smirk, his red-haired empress by his side. The emperor observed the mountain of lavish gifts before him, noting the quality of this year's offerings. But the presents were forgotten as a group of noble women gasped, pointing toward a rare and unexpected visitor. A woman in an elegant black dress walked down the red carpet, her heels clicking as the crowd murmured and parted before her. The whispers turned venomous as two noble women scoffed at her appearance, questioning how she dared to show her face. Another noble sneered at her choice of mourning clothes for a birthday celebration, calling her shameless. She was Adele Oswald, the beautiful and rebellious widow of the late Marquis. The crowd's attention focused on a strange, urn-shaped box Adele carried, which one noblewoman found particularly sinister. Inwardly, Adele admitted she was just as confused by the situation as everyone else. The emperor, she mused, had likely invited her only because she was by title the widow of the late Marquis. But in the eyes of the world, she was nothing more than a gold digger who had married a man old enough to be her father. The rumors didn't stop there. They accused her of poisoning him in cold blood and even seducing her own stepson. A scandalous affair born of lust, or so the vicious rumors claimed. They had labeled her the villainess, Adele Oswald. That was the story they told, but she sneered inwardly, knowing they were clueless about the truth. She offered the emperor a polite smile and birthday wishes, but he immediately commented on her unconventional choice of attire. With a confident smile, Adele claimed that black symbolized unity, expressing hope for the nation under his rule. But her inner thoughts were quite different. It was the only decent dress she owned, and she was just bluffing her way through. She remembered her past as a pitiful pauper and decided it was better to be a feared outcast now. Surrounded by crows, symbolizing her dark reputation, she resolved not to care, knowing they would scorn her regardless. The emperor accepted her explanation, his gaze then falling on the mysterious box she held. What's inside? She opened it to reveal cookies, a simple dessert she had baked herself for His Majesty. The court erupted in laughter, mocking her for presenting the emperor with such a shameless, peasant-like gift. Unfazed, Adele promised the taste was truly unique, made from her own secret recipe. The emperor, intrigued by her confidence, was about to try one, but the red-haired empress beside him sneered, claiming she already knew what it tasted like. "I'd say it's a taste to die for," the empress said with a cold, knowing smile. She then took it a step further, insinuating that the late Marquis must have loved her desserts. Adele flinched at the sharp accusation. Composing herself, Adele explained she had only started baking to cope with the grief of losing her husband. "He never had the chance to taste them," she added. Perhaps offering them to the emperor had been a mistake. She told him with a stiff smile to throw them away if they were a bother, privately seething with frustration. Just as the tension peaked, a handsome, white-haired man made a grand entrance, and Adele's head snapped in his direction. It was Count Weiss, the emperor's most trusted aide, who calmly apologized for his tardiness. Adele looked slightly unsettled, recognizing the name and recalling the man's formidable reputation. He was a legendary war hero, famous for his incredible feats on the battlefield against the neighboring country. Despite his fierce reputation, he was known for being devastatingly handsome, and most importantly, he was single. The ladies of society could barely contain themselves, swooning over his long-awaited appearance in high society. If that wasn't enough, he was also filthy rich, owning diamond mines, gold mines, and even a few banks. Oh my, it seems the ladies have found their new #1 gossip topic of the season. The Emperor jokingly accused the Count of eyeing his presents, but Vice simply smiled and asked if he could try one. To Adele's shock, the usually stern Emperor laughed and agreed, instantly confirming the extent of his favor toward the Count. Count Vice smiled and agreed to try one of her cookies. Crunch! He took a bite of the flower-shaped treat. He declared it the most delicious cookie he'd ever had, leaving Adele utterly stunned. The Empress found this unexpected, but Vice retorted humorously, asking if the Emperor thought he only ate raw meat. The Emperor laughed, saying that if the beast of the battlefield praised them, he ought to try one himself. A courtier handed the box to a nervous Adele for her to present to the Emperor. The Emperor took the box from her hands. Crunch! He took a bite, his golden crown glinting. He declared them too good to enjoy alone and invited everyone to try one, while Adele shifted nervously. Wow! As one noblewoman admitted they were good, Adele was amazed at how he'd completely changed the room's opinion with just a few words. Count Vice complimented her on the delicious cookies with a charming smile and asked if she would be his dance partner for the day. Her hand rested gently on his as she happily accepted his offer. Suddenly, a memory flashed by of a tear-streaked, white-haired boy from 10 years ago, desperately pleading for Adele not to leave him. Back in the present, she and the Count began to dance. With a rustle, her lace-gloved hand rested on his chest as she looked up at him. She couldn't help but think that this is what Chris would have looked like if he had grown up. He looked down at her with a knowing smile, his hand settling lightly on her waist. She flinched at the sudden touch, her thoughts racing. He gracefully spun her into the next part of the dance. In one fluid motion, he dipped her low, a confident smirk on his face. She gasped with a blush, her mind in turmoil. It couldn't be. His smile widened, confirming her unspoken fear. They continued to move across the dance floor. In a whisper, he leaned in to reveal his full name was Count Christian Vice, making her recoil in shock. He looked her in the eye and confirmed, "That's my name now, Adele. How could this be?" She stared at him, utterly bewildered by the revelation. He reassured her that she could still call him Chris, just like before, adding that he owed his dancing skills all to her. His words sent her spiraling into a memory. In a flashback, she tried to teach a young, complaining Chris to dance, but he immediately stepped on her foot. Ouch! The little boy brazenly claimed it was an accident. But then he did it again, this time pinching her hand and admitting that one was definitely on purpose. She glared at him, annoyed by his playful antics. He just grinned, his expression full of innocent joy. The memory faded, and she realized the boy from her past had returned after 10 long years as a completely different person. As they danced, she wondered what he had been through to become a count. She had so many questions, but after the way she had left him, she felt she had no right to ask. Masking her inner turmoil, she apologized and blamed her nervousness on not having danced in a long time. "Don't worry," he said. "Just follow my lead." He pulled her closer. He led her effortlessly, dipping her again, their bodies close. In a swirl, they glided across the floor as if flowers were blooming around them. She realized that while he had changed so much, the way he moved when he danced was exactly as she remembered. It felt just like it did 10 years ago, when she was still worrying about his steps. As they embraced, a genuinely happy smile finally graced her lips. A few days later, a fire crackled warmly in the hearth. Adele sat alone in a quiet room, wrapped in a shawl. She whispered his name to herself, Chris. A voice suddenly teased her for sighing so deeply, making her jump. She turned in shock to see a red-haired woman shouting, "Mia!" It was Mia Bonita, a countess and Adele's friend. TSK, Mia asked why Adele hadn't noticed her walk in, demanding to know what she was so lost in thought about. Adele tried to deflect by offering tea, but Mia grabbed her arm. Sit down, she insisted. The scene shifts to a cozy cottage nestled in a quiet, snowy wood. Mia urgently shook her friend, asking how the banquet went and if anyone had given her a hard time. Her concern shifted to a blonde woman named Sierra, wondering if she had caused trouble. Adele looked down, haunted by the memory. Adele assured her everything was fine, that everyone had loved the dessert, and that even Sierra had been on her best behavior this time. Mia stroked her chin, looking at Adele suspiciously despite her relief. Something wasn't adding up. But what's the problem then? She asked, pointing out Adele's strange mood. She observed that while Adele was always a bit off after attending a royal banquet, this time felt completely different. Mia reminded her that she was usually either chattering away or stress-baking until the kitchen was a mess. But this time she was just sighing and moping. Mia shot a joke that she was acting like a woman in love, which made Adele flinch and cry out her name in shock. Her overreaction only made Mia more curious. "Whoa, why are you so flustered?" she asked. A blushing Adele denied being in love with someone, but her beet-red face told a completely different story. Mia's eyes lit up as she put the pieces together. "Wait, don't tell me it's him. Count Christian Weiss. Oh my God," she exclaimed, gushing that every woman knew the Count and that he was criminally handsome. But her tone turned serious as she warned Adele to forget about it, revealing a rumor that he was about to become the Emperor's son-in-law. The rumor was that he would marry Princess April. An image of their wedding appeared as she spoke. Mia explained the political logic. The Emperor's position was unstable, and he needed a powerful son-in-law to consolidate his power, especially if he wanted to keep the ruthless Elders Guild in check. The explanation revealed the guild was composed of 5 unshakable noble families whose authority rivaled even the Emperor's. Adele thought of how the Oswald family she had married into was one of those powerful families. She understood the political chess game. The Emperor's power was weak, and his heir was just a child. To survive, he needed a strong right-hand man, a noble with no ties to the guild but powerful enough to challenge them. And that remarkable man, Mia concluded, was none other than Chris. Adele clutched her shawl, thinking she should be happy for him. And yet, she couldn't suppress the conflicting emotions welling up inside her. "So why do I feel this way?" Noticing her friend's pale face, Mia asked with concern if she was all right. Adele quickly covered it up, forcing a smile and insisting she was fine. To change the subject, she announced she was starving and was going to prepare food to share with the neighbors. Suddenly, a young, red-haired woman burst in, shouting, "We have a visitor." They were surprised to see Tanya, Adele's maid, who wondered who could be visiting so late. The breathless Tanya, who had come with Adele from the Oswald estate, explained she saw a huge carriage approaching. Mia grew worried, speculating it could be someone from the Oswald family or someone seeking revenge on the villainess. Not on their watch. Mia and Tanya puffed out their chests, trying to teach a lesson to whatever weirdo showed up. Adele just gave a cold smile, saying their protection wasn't necessary. She chillingly joked about using her infamous reputation, saying she'd serve them poison tea to get rid of them. Her friends shivered in fear, asking if she really planned to use her villainous reputation like that. No, the sound of hooves announced the visitor's arrival, and the 3 women stared nervously at the door. The door was flung open from the outside. An incredibly ornate carriage was parked in the snow, surrounded by cloaked attendants. Mia peered out the window, noting the unfamiliar crest on the carriage. Suddenly, her eyes widened in surprise as she recognized who it was. With the sound of footsteps, a handsome, white-haired man approached with a large bouquet of flowers, and Mia asked Adele, "Who is that man?" Adele clutched her chest, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. He stopped at her door while she screamed internally, but why? It was Chris, her mind a complete mess at his sudden appearance. Snow fell silently on the cottage, creating a quiet, tense atmosphere. Seeing the situation, Mia and Tanya made a swift exit, wishing her a good talk. "Real smooth, guys, real smooth." Left alone, Adele nervously accepted the flowers from Chris as he leaned casually against the wall. That day, she thought, her heart pounding with uncertainty. Chris confronted her with a sharp question, asking why she had disappeared from the banquet without a word. Holding the bouquet, Adele began to stammer a response. She flashed back to the dance, her heart racing as she remembered being in his arms. Clutching the flowers, she thought she couldn't tell him the real reason and decided to make an excuse. She claimed that since it was his first banquet, she had slipped away thinking he would be busy and apologized for upsetting him. His eye twitched in annoyance, and he scoffed at her apology. He coldly remarked that running away had always been her specialty. Trying to change the subject, she awkwardly asked how the old man's injured leg was doing. An awkward silence filled the air as her words trailed off, realizing her attempt to deflect had failed. He pressed on, ignoring her question and asking how she had been all this time. She forced a bright smile, insisting she had been doing well. His sharp gaze told her he didn't believe a word of it. To break the tension, she put the flowers in a vase, commenting that he had brought so many. She fidgeted, saying it was too much and that he could just throw them away. He looked around her humble home, saying he'd bring something she actually needed next time. She was shocked by his words. "You're coming again?" He coldly asked if there was a reason he shouldn't, while she worried about the prying eyes of the small community. He glared, demanding to know what the problem was. He pointed out that she was a widow now, so what was wrong with seeing a man? His directness left her speechless. She tried desperately to friend-zone him, insisting he was like a dear younger brother to her. In an instant, he closed the distance between them, whispering, "Then there's no problem, is there?" Her face turned beet red, completely caught off guard by his sudden move. She stumbled back, trying to create space. She let out a gasp as she lost her balance. He caught her arm to steady her before she could fall. Pulling her close, he asked why she was so surprised. She flusteredly accused him of invading her personal space. He leaned in closer, playfully asking if she was having naughty thoughts. As she desperately denied it, he watched her with an intense, unreadable expression. He gently lifted her chin, noting how distant she was acting after so long apart. His gaze was electric, that one turquoise eye boring into hers. Thump, thump, her heart hammered in her chest as she looked up at him, completely captivated. Suddenly, she broke the mood, pinching both his cheeks and telling him to stop teasing her. Still pinching his face, she insisted he would always be the little brat who followed her around like a puppy. Her expression softened as she remembered the little boy with the beautiful smile who was obsessed with apple pie. He challenged her, asking if she remembered something else from their past. He leaned in again, his voice a low whisper, and asked if she remembered who her first kiss was with. He closed the distance, their lips touching as she stared wide-eyed in shock. She pushed him away, yelling at him and demanding how that could even count as a kiss. She rambled, explaining that he wasn't breathing after a drowning accident and she was just giving him CPR. Still babbling, she admitted she kissed him out of relief when he started breathing again, arguing it wasn't a real kiss. He smirked, asking why her face was as red as a tomato. She retorted that her face wasn't red and that there was something wrong with his eyes. "You're such a Captain Stubborn," she yelled, the old nickname making him blush in surprise. She paused for a moment, her eyes wide, perhaps surprised she had said it out loud. He let out a choked sound, trying to hold back his laughter. Clutching his reddened face, he let out a genuine laugh, admitting it had been years since she'd called him Captain Stubborn. He sighed and relaxed onto the sofa, saying that while she had changed, her stubborn personality was exactly the same. She finally laughed along with him, the heavy tension between them at last dissipating. As the fire warmed the room, she said sincerely that she was truly glad they could meet again. But she told him he couldn't come back, warning that nothing good would come from being associated with her. He turned on the sofa, his expression serious, as he simply asked, "Why not?" He hit her with the cold, hard truth, asking if her infamous reputation as the woman who poisoned her husband was the problem. She whipped around, stunned. "You know?" she asked, trembling. Unfazed by her shock, Chris stated that it didn't matter whether she was truly guilty or had been framed. Her composure crumbled as she whispered his name. He declared with unshakable confidence that her bad reputation meant nothing to him and wouldn't even leave a scratch on his honor. Oh, so that's what he meant. Realizing the extent of his power, she quickly changed the subject, asking how he became a noble in the first place. He said nothing, his one sharp, turquoise eye saying it all. He stood up, revealing that he had brought glory to the Emperor. Then, with a sly smile, he asked if she would at least offer him a meal after 10 years apart. She reminded him he had shown up unannounced, adding that there was nothing to eat. He proudly insisted he was starving and would eat anything, prompting her to jab that a high and mighty noble couldn't even get a proper meal. With a weary sigh, she relented, agreeing to see what she could find for him. He rested his head on his hand, looking like the cat that got the cream, thanking her and calling her the best. Ugh, but his charm offensive was working a little too well, and her heart skipped a beat against her will. Blushing furiously, she pointed at him and suddenly yelled that what happened that day was definitely not a kiss. He just kept smiling, clearly enjoying her flustered state. He had won this round hands down. He calmly tapped his fingers on his leg, looking pleased with himself. A close-up shows his fingers tapping restlessly. The scene flashes back to the past, a memory of a hand tapping on a wine glass. Chris listened as someone identified a portrait of the late Marquise Oswald. The Emperor instructed him to attend the banquet and get close to her. Chris cautiously asked why. Swirling his wine, the Emperor revealed she might possess a certain document from the late Marquis. The Emperor explained with a smirk that it was a blank piece of paper, but one that bore his own signature. In the grand, empty hall, he asked grimly if the favor was too difficult. Chris, known as Count Weiss, listened with a blank expression. He realized that blank document was what the Emperor had been desperately searching for all these years. He smiled, agreeing to approach Adele and investigate. The Emperor took a sip of wine, granting him permission to approach her. But he added a stern warning. Don't do anything that would displease April. The Emperor reminded him that he was practically family, asking if he understood the delicate situation. Chris swore his loyalty, but the Emperor's subtle reaction hinted at a deeper tension between them. Back in the present, Adele returned with the soup, only to find Chris had already fallen asleep on the sofa. He was sleeping soundly, completely at peace. As the fire warmed the cozy room, she gently draped a blanket over him. A memory surfaced. 10 years ago, a young Adele hurried across a frozen lake. She was worried about being late to deliver Chris's lunch. She knew he'd be angry with her for taking the dangerous shortcut, but she couldn't bear the thought of him going hungry. Her confidence shattered as the ice beneath her feet began to crack with a horrifying sound. In an instant, she plunged into the dark, icy water, sinking into the depths. Her last thought was of Chris, still waiting for her. As she lost consciousness, she heard a voice from above desperately calling her name. A young, white-haired Chris dove into the water, reaching for her. Her consciousness finally faded into the icy darkness. The surface of the frozen lake was quiet and still, belying the life-or-death struggle happening beneath. Pulled from the water, Adele shivered uncontrollably, calling out for Chris. Her eyes shot open in sudden panic. She found him unresponsive on the ground, desperately shaking him and pleading for him to open his eyes. A pale dread washed over her as she touched his icy skin and realized he wasn't breathing. She blamed herself for his condition, overwhelmed with guilt and despair. She refused to give up. She leaned down and began giving him CPR, begging him not to die. Again and again, she breathed desperately, forcing life into him. He finally stirred weakly, asking her why she was crying. She sobbed his name in overwhelming relief, clinging to him and crying that she really thought he was going to die. Chris tried to assure Adele he was fine, but she sobbed that he was a liar, pointing to his blue lips. Holding her close in the snow, he told her that her own lips were even bluer when she said she was freezing. He gently wiped away her tears, his expression softening as he admitted he was cold too. He told her just how cold it was as their lips met in a desperate, warming kiss. The memory continued, wondering if it was body heat or overwhelming relief that had ignited the moment. She recalled how it had just kept happening, one kiss after another, lost in the snowy landscape. The memory ended with one undeniable truth. It had most definitely been a real kiss. Adele woke with a start, blushing as the vivid dream of that past kiss flooded her mind. Touching her lips, she finally understood why Chris was so hung up on their first kiss and wondered why the dream had felt so real. She looked up, the question hanging in the empty room. The sofa was empty and Chris was gone. The soup sat untouched on the table, and she wondered if he had really left without a single word. She clutched the blanket he had used, annoyed that he hadn't even woken her to say goodbye. The anger melted into the sad reality that after a decade of being strangers, she had no right to be upset. The scene changes. Inside the carriage, Zimmer, the vice commander of the White Ghosts, asked Chris how the lady had reacted to the flowers. Zimmer smirked, boasting that flowers were the perfect gift, but Chris's angry blush told a completely different story. Sitting in the carriage, Chris snapped that he would never let Zimmer pick a gift again, while Zimmer just said it was odd that Adele didn't like flowers. Zimmer pressed on, noting they seemed to get along well, and asking why Chris had left so soon. Chris, bright red, gave the most unexpected excuse ever. It's my rutting season. As the carriage moved through the winter fields, Zimmer dryly commented that it was, after all, winter. Getting down to business, Zimmer asked about his relationship with the Marquise, pointing out that they seemed to know each other well. Chris scoffed, saying she was just a woman who insisted on calling herself a sister, leaving Zimmer completely baffled. Touching his lips, he added grimly that she was also the one who turned him into a beast. He licked his lips with a flushed expression, admitting that on a snowy night like this, her scent was hard to resist. Zimmer was stunned, realizing there was a much deeper history between them than he had thought, which explained the commander's urgency. In a flashback, Zimmer reported on his investigation into Adele's past. Zimmer explains that she married an old Marquis at 18, leading to rumors that she was a gold digger. The briefing continues, mentioning she was accused of poisoning her husband 2 years later, but was only exiled due to insufficient evidence, a fact Chris finds highly suspicious. Twitch. The corner of Chris's eye twitches when Zimmer mentions the rumor about her affair with the Marquis' son, and he cuts him off sharply. He abruptly orders a carriage prepared, deciding to head to her residence in Green Hill immediately, much to Zimmer's surprise. Flashback. In the memory, Zimmer eagerly offers to investigate the Marquis himself, asking his commander to trust him. Jolt to reality. Chris coldly refuses, claiming that if she were innocent, she would have sought help long ago. Her silence, to him, is an admission of guilt. Rest. He rests his chin in his hand, scoffing at the thought of someone I care about. In another flashback, he gently covers a sleeping Adele with a blanket, his voiceover coldly stating that wanting a woman doesn't mean he loves her. Chris continues his dark monologue, warning that he is not a forgiving person. He declares with icy eyes that he could never love someone who betrayed him. The scene shifts to a serene, snowy view of Adele's cozy cottage in the forest. Bang! Two women burst into the house in a panic, shouting Adele's name. They frantically surround her, asking if Count Weiss has left and confirming his identity. The orange-haired woman bluntly asks if he proposed, while Adele awkwardly tries to calm them down. Scream. The two friends giggle, convinced of his intentions, with a red-haired girl insisting a man wouldn't send flowers unless he was completely smitten. Sparkle. The red-haired woman, Tanya, looks starstruck, prompting a confused Adele to ask how she knows of Count Weiss. Tanya excitedly explains that he's a famous war hero and the commander of the legendary White Ghost Knights. Blink. Adele is stunned by this revelation, realizing that the little Chris from her past is now the leader of the most famous knight order in the entire empire. Zoom in. Her friends crowd her again, practically trembling with excitement, pressing her on whether he proposed. Ugh. She pushes them away, completely flustered and unsure where to even begin explaining her complicated history with him. Knock knock. Suddenly, a knock at the door interrupts the conversation, a voice asking if anyone is home. The interrogation stops as an authoritative voice from outside announces they are from the Imperial Palace. Stare. The three women freeze, staring at the door with wide, disbelieving eyes. A royal attendant enters, flanked by guards, and announces that His Majesty was very pleased with the desserts she sent. He then delivers a royal command. She is now officially commissioned to supply desserts to the Imperial Palace on a regular basis, leaving the women stunned. Flip. A royal attendant hands Adele an official document. The dust settles. After reading the contract, she realizes she only has to deliver desserts once a month, and the quantity is up to her. Blush. Overjoyed, she thinks to herself that she'll never have to worry about money again. Clatter. Her celebration is cut short when three noble women appear at her door. The one in the middle greets her formally. Chuckle. The pink-haired woman gushes that she can't stop thinking about the cookies from the banquet and asks if it's true the palace just placed an order. She adds that they've come to place an order too, and Adele is stunned, thinking how fast rumors travel. Now, they're having tea together, with the ladies praising the cookies and one insisting her friend try another flavor. Click. The pink-haired woman praises her talent, making Adele a bit uncomfortable as she admits it's the first time nobles have been so kind to her. Grin. The woman leans in with a sly look, ready to reveal the real reason for her visit. She bluntly asks Adele what her relationship is with Count Weiss. Chill. Adele freezes completely, caught off guard by the personal question. Giggle. Another woman chimes in, saying they look like a perfect couple and that her black dress was surprisingly elegant. Smirk. The third woman whispers that she heard the Count even stopped by for a visit. Fanning the flames. Wince. The The woman reveals her true intentions, asking Adele to arrange a meeting with the Count, who is rumored to become the captain of the Royal Guard, so she can ask for a favor to get her son through the entrance exam. Adele realizes this was never about the cookies. They were just buttering her up for a favor. The narration explains that in a small town like Greenhill, gossip spreads like wildfire and grows with each telling. Shatter. She panics, imagining scandalous rumors spreading while Chris is busy with the princess. The image of his smile shatters in her mind. She gasps, realizing she has to put a stop to this immediately. Steeling herself, she begins to explain the truth about her and the Count. Clench. As the ladies lean in expectantly, Adele resolves to tell them there's nothing between them. Grab. But a vivid memory of a desperate, passionate kiss she shared with Chris flashes through her mind. Phew. In a panic, she blurts out the first thing that comes to her head. He's my brother. Gasp. Stunned. The women are speechless, their jaws collectively hitting the floor. What? Adele forces a smile and explains they grew up together like family. So he's basically like her real brother, trying to convince herself it's not a complete lie. Nonsense. She quickly concocts a story that they lost touch after she moved away and only recently reconnected at the banquet. But a flashback to them dancing at the banquet shows an atmosphere that was definitely more than just friendly. Click. The pink-haired woman sets down her cup, demanding confirmation that she's really not involved with the Count. She then introduces herself as Lady Hans. She's a distant relative of the Oswald family, which immediately puts Adele on high alert. Flip. Lady Hans smiles sweetly, handing her an invitation to a New Year's party at her estate. Adele politely declines, saying her presence would only make others uncomfortable. Clatter. Her orange-haired friend, Tanya, isn't having it, insisting it's the perfect chance for her to re-enter society. Clap. Lady Hans then warmly invites Tanya to come along as well, completely catching Tanya off guard. Though Lady Hans says it's to make Adele feel comfortable, Tanya politely refuses, claiming she's too busy. Sparkle. But her inner thoughts betray her as she mentally begs Adele to go, whining that it's been ages since she's been to a party. Faced with her friend's pleading, sparkling eyes, Adele's resolve begins to waver. With a strange little smile, she finally relents and agrees to go to the party. The scene shifts to the quiet cottage under a beautiful starry sky. Click. Later that night, Tanya complains about the budding romance being ruined, calling the brother excuse lame. Adele, holding the flowers from Chris, focuses on their new palace contract, but Tanya still hopes she'll get with the Count, purely to spite the Oswalds. Pout. Tanya insists she just wants to see Adele happy and treated well, away from the painful memories of her past marriage. Sigh. She then asks a difficult question. If she has a powerful brother like the Count, why not ask for his help against the Oswalds? Adele flinches. Sting. Lost in painful memories, her finger is accidentally pricked by a rose thorn. Jolt. Tanya gasps and rushes to her side, asking if she's okay as Adele presses her bleeding finger. Sobi. Feeling guilty, Tanya immediately apologizes for bringing it up. Drip. Adele forces a smile, claiming she's put the Oswalds behind her, but a single drop of blood slides from her finger. Clang. A dark memory from behind a heavy, locked door reveals that some things can never truly be forgotten. Screech. A few days later, their carriage pulls up to Lady Hans's grand and imposing estate. Clang. Stepping out of the carriage, Tanya can't help but marvel, wow, this house is huge. They are immediately stopped by an arrogant man in a maroon suit who demands to know their business, forcing Adele to explain they're here for the party. Lift. She presents the invitation, but the man just glances at it disdainfully, questioning if she was really invited. Confused by his tone, Adele asks why they would be at the party if they weren't invited. Click. The attendant reluctantly leads them inside, leaving Adele to wonder why he's acting so strangely. Wince. Suddenly, a familiar voice rings out, expressing surprise at seeing her here. Whoosh. Adele freezes, thinking it can't possibly be the one voice she dreads hearing most. Click. A glamorous blonde woman makes a grand entrance. It's Sarah, the late Marquis Oswald's daughter, who addresses Adele as mother. Sarah lets out an aggressive chuckle, pointing out the party's dress code is fur, and Adele realizes the attendant's rudeness was intentional. Wave. Lady Hans, fanning herself, adds that they didn't mention the dress code because fur was probably too expensive for Adele and her friend. Sneer. Sarah offers to lend them some of her old hand-me-downs. Adele realizes it's a trap and that Lady Hans is in on it with Sarah. Tug. Fed up, Adele decides to leave, but Tanya grabs her sleeve. Stops her. Flip. Shakes her head. Adele turns to Tanya, who silently shakes her head, refusing to back down. Whisper. Tanya insists they can't leave now, urging Adele to stay and not give them the satisfaction. Inspired by her friend's fighting spirit, Adele lets out a small, determined laugh. Annoyed, Lady Hans snaps that she wasn't talking to them anyway and leads another guest away. Footsteps. Tanya immediately pounces on another guest, gushing over her jewelry and demanding a look, leaving the woman bewildered. Adele watches, momentarily stunned by her friend's brazen move. As they move around, a guest tells them she hopes everyone makes good memories today. Grin. But a dark vision shows Adele with a wicked smile as other guests recoil, whispering that the rumors of her being a poisoner must be true. Rustle. The scene shifts to a fountain, where Adele confronts Sarah, asking if this was all her plan. Shrug. Sarah feigns innocence, telling Adele it's a bad habit to blame others. She then changes the subject to Count Weiss. Sarah presses her, asking if he's really just a brother. Adele stands her ground, saying he's family and questioning why Sarah cares. With a wicked smile, Sarah makes a shocking proposal. If he's just a brother, then Adele should set them up. Adele is stunned, asking incredulously why she would do that. Sarah lays out her terms. Help her marry the Count, and she'll clear Adele's name. Adele scoffs, questioning what value that has now. Sarah argues that if the Count marries into the Oswald family, he'll be eligible for the Council of Nobles. Haha. Wiping a tear from her eye, Adele tells Sarah to think about the real reason the Emperor trusts Count Weiss so much. Sarah is stumped, wondering what the reason could be. Flicker. The answer flashes before her eyes. A vision of the Emperor and a loyal Chris, implying a bond that goes beyond politics. Snap. Sarah gasps, the realization dawning on her. The Emperor sees him as a potential son-in-law. Ha. Adele smugly confirms her fears, though she admits. Tremble. She twists the knife, asking a trembling Sarah who Chris would choose, a princess or the mere daughter of a marquis. Adele turns away, telling Sarah to stop chasing phantoms and announcing she's going back to the party. As she leaves, Sarah quietly asks if that's really how she feels about him. Pause. Sarah loudly accuses Adele of having feelings for him too, which stops her in her tracks. Smirk. Sarah reveals she saw their intimate dance at the banquet. She questions Adele, asking if the way she looked at him was really how a sister looks at a brother. Smirk. Adele turns back with a chilling smile, completely turning the tables. You really do love me, don't you? Completely flustered, Sarah stammers that her accusation is ridiculous. Footsteps. Adele slowly advances, pointing out how Sarah always hovers around her. Leans in. She gets very close, comparing Sarah's obsession to that of a child begging for a mother's love. Tremble. Shaking with rage, Sarah furiously yells at Adele to stop acting like a mother. Outburst. Sarah screams that Adele will set her up with the Count, vowing to make it happen. Adele just smiles slightly, completely unfazed by the threat. She calmly tells Sarah to do her best, but that she doubts it will go her way. The narration describes Sarah Oswald, a social queen who ruled high society like a private playground, with Adele as her primary victim, smeared as the villainess who poisoned her husband, and seduced her stepson to escape the same fate. All the other noble girls stayed away, terrified of getting on Sarah's bad side. But Adele, ostracized and isolated, never cared for their games. Back at the party, Adele is the center of attention, with ladies flocking to her, asking for her cookie recipe. They're all obsessed with her connection to the Count, asking if he'll show up, but Adele just laughs nervously. She thinks to herself that even her cruel stepdaughter, Sarah, wouldn't dare bother her in public anymore, all thanks to Chris. She remembers Chris assuring her that her reputation would never tarnish his, and she realizes he meant it. Her friend Tanya approaches in a conspicuous fur coat, asking how she looks, and Adele tells her she's stunning. Tanya declares they're going to have fun and makes Sarah furious, just as an attendant brings them drinks. Clink. They toasted their plan for a perfect night. Adele takes a sip of her drink, ready to enjoy the party, but suddenly, the world around her begins to blur and distort. In a terrifying flash, she imagines a hand clamping over her mouth, stifling her scream. A man with pink hair and a sinister look grabs her, whispering that it's been a while. snapping out of the vision, Adele finds herself alone near a doorway, feeling flushed and unsteady. A wave of dizziness hits her, and she feels sick, thinking there's no way she's drunk after just one drink. Sway. The grand hallway tilts violently, and she knows something is terribly wrong. Gasp. She has a sudden realization. The attendant who served them their drinks disappeared immediately afterward. She realizes with horror that he must have drugged her drink. Grab. Suddenly, the pink-haired man from her vision appears, offering to help her. She weakly tries to refuse. Wince. He ignores her, his smile turning predatory as he insists she needs his help. A chill runs down her spine as she gets a good look at him and recognizes her attacker. Whoosh. Just as she feared, he lunges, clamping a hand over her mouth to muffle her cries. Grip. He grabs her chin, his smile widening as he sneers. Long time no see, my lady. Meanwhile, a new guest has arrived. Princess April Valencia, who is currently in marriage talks with Chris. Sarah curtsies, greeting Lady Hans, who is accompanying the princess. The princess looks around curiously, mentioning she doesn't see the Marquise Oswald. Glance. Princess April explains she heard Adele was close with Count Weiss and wanted to meet her, so Lady Hans slyly points toward a private room. Smirk. The princess seems pleased at the chance for a private chat, and Sarah smirks, eagerly offering to lead the way. Click. A group of ladies follows Sarah down the hall, stopping before a closed door. One woman peeks into the room, whispering for them to come this way, just as a muffled sound is heard. The princess gasps, asking if that was a moan, and one of the women confirms she saw the Marquise go inside. Mutta. The ladies whisper behind their hands, gossiping that Adele can't control herself and that some things never change. Blush. A blushing Princess April suggests they leave, but Sarah coldly tells her no. Smirk. Sarah declares that her family's honor is at stake, and she must see what's happening. Stride. She marches forward with grim determination, ready to expose Adele's scandal. Phew. Sarah throws open the doors with a triumphant, wicked grin, expecting to catch Adele in the act, but her victorious expression instantly crumbles into pure confusion. Gasp. Oh my. Eek. The other women look inside, letting out shocked gasps because the person they find is not a compromised Adele, but Viscount Eaton, tied to a chair and gagged. The women stand in stunned silence, utterly bewildered by the scene. Blink. Elsewhere, Adele slowly wakes up to someone softly calling her name. It's Chris, leaning over her with deep concern, asking if she's all right. Jolt. She sits up in shock, asking how he's here, but he gently pushes her back down, telling her to rest. Clink. He's already poured her a glass of water. Safe on a sofa, Chris asks what happened. She deflects, deciding not to mention the drugging until she has proof. Her mind flashes back to being dragged into the room by Viscount Eaton. She realizes Chris saved her and thanks him, but he just smirks that the Viscount is the one who should be thanking him. Whoosh. Clang. He dangles a small object from his necklace, revealing he saved the Viscount's life because she was about to slit the man's throat. Gasp. Adele panics, realizing he found her hidden dagger. Snatch. She lunges for it, mortified, insisting it was just for self-defense, but he's too quick. She's internally embarrassed, thinking that just when she wanted to show him she was doing fine, he finds her carrying a knife. The secret's out. A close-up reveals the dagger tucked into a garter on her thigh. Awkward. She awkwardly tries to cover up while Chris watches, clearly amused by her predicament. Glance. Chris muses that her bloodthirsty attitude fits the villainous image, to which Adele coolly replies, "I'll take that as a compliment." Shush. He suddenly reaches for her, calling her name and catching her off guard. Grasp. Her heart skips a beat as he gently takes her hand, leaving her utterly confused. TSK. He inspects her hand, noticing the injury, and scolds her for brandishing a weapon blindly, calling it self-harm, not self-defense. Adele admits she just felt safer carrying it, but concedes she would have been in real danger if he hadn't shown up. He scoffs, downplaying his role, explaining the Viscount was already terrified of her, so he just knocked him out for good measure. Taking him a bit too literally, she gasps, "You stripped him?" Chris just smirks, asking if that was too merciful for the guy. Haha. Adele bursts out laughing as he jokes that maybe he should have left the man his underwear, shocked that he stripped him bare. Haha. Adele bursts out laughing as he jokes that maybe he should have left the man his underwear, shocked that he stripped him bare. His words hit her hard when he reveals he's here as Princess April's escort, and her smile instantly vanishes. Shadow. The Empress's cutting words from their last meeting echo in her mind, questioning if Adele has feelings for him. Snap. Adele tries to regain her composure, snapping a ribbon in her hands and insisting she's fine now. Footsteps. As she suggests they go back, Chris listens with an unreadable expression. Whisper. He pulls her close and shushes her, whispering that a search party is looking for the Viscount. Nod. Convinced they'll be caught, he suggests they escape through the window, and she quickly agrees. Flutter. The curtains flutter as they move toward the open window. Reaches. Under a breathtaking starry sky, Chris stands outside, holding out his hand to her, urging her to join. She freezes for a moment, surprised by his dramatic escape plan. Rustle. Her heart races as she looks at the beautiful night sky, lost in the moment. She wonders if it's because she's with Chris that she can find beauty even in such a tense situation. Footsteps. He crouches on the windowsill, confirming it's the first floor, and she agrees. Jump. Saying she can manage on her own, she takes a leap of faith out the window toward him. Thud. She lands gracefully on the grass below. Whoosh. She turns to face him with a triumphant smile, and a sweet memory flashes by. A young, carefree Adele happily calling his name. Hush. Back in the present, she proudly declares, "Told you I could do it." Clench. Watching her, Chris clenches his fist, a subtle but intense reaction stirring within him. Footsteps. As they walk through the garden, she excitedly tells him she's now supplying desserts to the palace, and he congratulates her. Footsteps. She playfully accuses him of pulling strings with the Emperor, but he denies it, saying they have more important things to discuss. Nod. Then he smirks, admitting his glowing review likely sealed the deal for her. Blush. Adele concedes he's right. The Emperor only tried her food because of his recommendation. Flip. She turns to offer him her heartfelt thanks, but he leans in teasingly, asking if a verbal thank you is all he gets. Pause. After a moment's thought, she offers to bake him an apple pie. His expression softens as he requests the special kind her mother used to make, recalling fond childhood memories of the three of them together. A wave of sadness hits her as she agrees it was delicious, lamenting that she never learned her mother's recipe before it was too late. The dark memory of finding her parents' bodies resurfaces, a cruel reminder of their sudden, tragic parting. Chris gently tells her the pie doesn't have to be perfect, then cuts her off, saying that instead of delivering it, she should invite him over. Stop. He stops her in her tracks. Flip. She quickly refuses, worried about what the princess would think, but he completely dismisses her concern. Footsteps. Wince. He closes the distance, reminding her that she's the one who told everyone he was like a brother. This makes her shrink back in a fluster, insisting it wasn't a lie while avoiding his gaze. Smirk. He throws her own words back at her, pointing out that it's perfectly normal for a brother to visit his sister. Yank. Pulling her close, his playful demeanor vanishes as he whispers that the more she pushes him away, the more he wants to tease her. The mood darkens with his final, intense warning not to push him away. Chirp. The moment is broken as he turns and walks away, leaving her alone under the stars. Click. Back inside, Adele stands rigidly, trying to process what just happened. Just then, a frantic Mia rushes over, asking where she's been. Adele lies, blaming her absence on the strong drink. Whisper. Mia quickly pulls her along, saying they have to go say hello to the princess before she leaves. Adele's face falls as she's pulled back into the lively party. Whisper. Across the room, Chris leans close to Princess April, whispering something in her ear. The princess blushes and giggles, completely charmed by him. Throb. As Adele muses, the narration notes that her expression is unmistakably that of a woman in love. Click. A blonde woman greets Marquise Oswald, but Adele explains she was just about to leave and is glad she ran into her. Bow. Adele apologizes to the princess for being out for a walk, but the princess is just happy they could speak. Grasp. Princess April suddenly grabs Adele's hands in excitement, inviting her to the palace so they can talk more. Whisper. She leans in to reveal her true motive. She wants Adele to tell her everything about Count Weiss. Smile. Adele puts on a pleasant face and agrees to the princess's request. The princess, delighted by her answer, beams. Whoosh. Adele watches with a melancholy expression as the princess and Chris depart. Chatter. Nearby ladies gossip that a royal wedding seems imminent, sighing over what a perfect couple they make. Whisper. Adele stands silently, forced to listen to the piercing rumors around her. Suddenly, Sarah appears behind her with a vicious, triumphant smirk. A chill runs down Adele's spine as she recognizes her stepdaughter, her expression darkening as she says Sarah's name. Sarah taunts that Adele wasn't so lucky, but Adele plays dumb, asking what she means. Clench. Adele coldly tells Sarah that today it was Viscount Eaton. Wince. But next time, it will be Sarah's turn, and she'd better be careful. Sarah recoils in shock, demanding to know what she means. Adele calmly tells Sarah she knows exactly what it means, and to give Lady Hans a message. It was a memorable party. Click. Adele and her friend turn to leave, leaving a trembling Sarah to watch them go in a rage. Fury. Later in the carriage, Adele's friend Mia angrily asks if the attacker was the same lunatic who proposed right after the funeral. She goes on to remind Adele that he was the pervert who scrawled obscenities on the wall after being rejected, which Adele quietly confirms. Adele reassures her that nothing happened, explaining she woke up in a lounge because Chris saved her. Sigh. Mia then reveals that she also felt dizzy and passed out after a drink. Adele is stunned, realizing her friend was drugged too. Mia connects the dots and flies into a rage, realizing Sarah and Viscount Eaton must have tampered with the drinks. Doomed. Adele calmly interjects, telling a furious Mia that she already got a little revenge. Haha. Smirk. Meanwhile, back at the party, a scream rings out as someone calls for Miss Sarah. Drip. Sarah stands in horror, covered in sticky caramel, wondering how it got all over her. Someone tells her the caramel is too matted and they'll have to cut her hair, and she begs them not to. It seems Mia's revenge was both sweet and sticky. Clang. Later that night, Princess April is escorted to her carriage. Under the stars, the princess nervously thanks Count Weiss for the evening, and he politely replies that the pleasure was his. As she pauses, the princess recalls meeting the late Marquis Oswald's wife. She admitted to herself that Adele was even more beautiful, elegant, and graceful than the rumors suggested. The princess thus concluded that she could understand if Chris fell in love with Adele. This caused Chris's eyelid to twitch involuntarily. Noticing his strange reaction, the princess asked the Viscount if everything was all right. After a tense silence, Chris turned to her and said that she was also beautiful, making the princess's heart pound. Her heart racing, she clutched her dress, wondering if he truly had feelings for her. Driven by a surge of courage, she looked him straight in the eye and asked if he would give her a kiss. She swallowed nervously, her courage immediately vanishing as she thought, I knew it. Of course it's impossible. Overcome with shame, she tried to pull her hand back, saying she should leave. But Chris gently stopped her, raising her hand to his lips and placing a gentle kiss upon it. With a charming smile, he wished her sweet dreams, leaving her standing there, utterly stunned. The princess's face was flushed, her heart beating so fast it felt like it might leap from her chest. The next morning, sunlight streamed down onto the roof of a cozy cottage. Inside, Adele took a bite of apple pie, somewhat disappointed that it didn't taste like her mother's. Her thoughts drifted to Chris, who once told her he still missed her mother's apple pie and hoped to taste it again. Lost in thought, she touched her lips, hoping to grant his wish. She recalled her childhood when her mother ran the best bakery in the neighborhood. She remembered one day seeing a little boy standing alone in the gallery outside the bakery. He was thin and frail, with striking silver hair and blue-gray eyes, his stomach rumbling with hunger. A young Adele overheard people whispering that he was the son of the miner who had run off with someone. She ignored the gossip and approached the lonely boy, kindly sharing her food with him. She wondered if she helped the boy because he reminded her of herself, or perhaps because of his otherworldly eyes. The little silver-haired boy blushed shyly and admitted he did want something to eat. A young Adele broke into a brilliant smile, feeling an instant connection to the mysterious boy. After that meeting, Chris came every day. She taught him everything, watching him follow her around like an eager puppy. Her mother was delighted, saying it felt like she had gained a son, and soon, their small family of 3 became perfectly natural and harmonious. She recalled those days with a full heart and stomach, thinking, I was truly happy then. But that happiness was shattered in the winter of her 18th year. Her mother had been found in the forest, her body torn apart by a wild beast. The painful memory still made her clench her fists involuntarily. Two familiar voices interrupted her thoughts, announcing their return. Her two friends asked in surprise if she's been baking pies by herself all morning. Adele smiled, confirming she was trying to make an apple pie, and asked if they wanted to try some. They immediately and happily agreed. They dug in, showering her with compliments and praising her as the best. Adele, pleased that they liked it, told them there's plenty more and no need to rush. While enjoying the pie, Mia mentioned she's waiting for someone, piquing Adele's curiosity. Adele was startled when Mia revealed it's her brother, Mark, who was coming over. Mia slyly explained that her brother had been separated from his wife for a while. The matchmaking began. She reminded a flustered Adele that since she only saw the Count as a brother, she couldn't just stand by. Mia insisted Adele needed to start dating to keep the weirdos away, adding that Mark had always had a soft spot for her. As Adele panicked, Mia quickly backtracked, saying he was just stopping by to say hello and that there was no pressure. Then, with a mischievous grin, Mia suggested a little makeup couldn't hurt. Horrified by the sudden makeover attempt, Adele yelled for her to stay away. Just then, a man walked in, and Mia energetically greeted her brother, Mark, causing him to shrink back a little. Without hesitation, Mia grabbed her brother's arm and pulled him inside for a formal introduction. She proudly presented the dolled-up Adele, who now had flowers in her hair and light makeup on. Mia continued the introduction with exaggerated gestures. A nameplate identified him as Mark Kessler, Mia's brother and a veterinarian. He nervously greeted Adele. Adele awkwardly welcomed him and offered him some pie, while her friends applauded the successful setup. Suddenly, Mia feigned a crisis, claiming she forgot to bring yarn for Tanya, who played along perfectly. Adele watched in disbelief, realizing her friends were ditching her to be alone with Mark. In the sudden silence, Adele nervously asked Mark to sit down. He sat down, telling her he was glad to see she was looking better. She immediately panicked. He let out a small laugh, having guessed what was on her mind. Mark took a sip from his cup, a slight blush rising to his cheeks. Adele watched him uneasily, wondering where this conversation was headed. Feeling the pressure, she quickly changed the subject, asking about his pet. How is Jade? He said Jade would love the pie, but then his expression turned thoughtful. His face fell slightly as he said her offer sounded like she wanted him to leave right away. She immediately apologized, explaining that it just felt a bit awkward being alone. He admitted he felt awkward too, fidgeting with his hands. Then he smiled and proposed a solution. He'll just have to visit a few more times until it's not strange anymore. Adele, sensing he was a genuinely good person, agreed and told him to bring Jade next time. Mark's carriage departed, and tranquility returned to the cottage. But it was immediately followed by the arrival of another carriage and a firm knock on the door that startled her. The door opened to reveal an unexpected and imposing guest. It was Chris. Adele and Mark stared at him in shock, and she demanded to know why he was here without any notice. Chris narrowed his eyes, his cold gaze fixed on Mark. He asked in a biting tone if he was interrupting their quality time, which Adele quickly denied. But then she stopped, a wave of defiance washing over her, and decided she had nothing to explain. As Adele stood there awkwardly, Mark introduced himself with a charming smile as Baron Mark Kessler, addressing the Viscount. Mark looked a bit surprised, stammering uncertainly. Chris dismissed Mark with a contemptuous sneer, saying he'd never heard of him. He then turned to Adele, saying a Marchioness should see people of a suitable status, which made Adele shout, "Chris, you're being so rude." Chris simply retorted with a bone-chilling smile, "Am I?" Sensing the tense atmosphere, Mark decided to make a graceful exit, suggesting they have a proper introduction next time. He told Adele he should be going, while she protested, calling out, "Baron Kessler." "But before I go," he said, leaning in closer, which confused her. He gently kissed her hand, leaving her completely stunned and speechless. Seeing this, a flash of fury crossed Chris's eyes. Mark gave Chris a defiant and knowing smirk. Chris's expression hardened, filled with pure rage. The two men were locked in a tense, silent standoff. As Adele looked away, Chris broke the silence, holding out a wax-sealed invitation for her to take, explaining it was from the princess. Her head throbbing, she asked if that was the only reason he came. He lowered his head, admitting he also wanted to see if she remembered her promise. He noticed her makeup and the flowers, touching her chin as he said, "She really went a lot of trouble." Adele felt a chill as he toyed with a lock of her hair, asking darkly if she was planning to marry that man. Adele recoiled from his chilling presence, swatting his hand away and telling him to mind his own business. "This is my marriage," she yelled, asking what right he had to interfere. He calmly reminded her that since she called him her dear brother, he had every right to have an opinion on the matter. She angrily rejected his excuse, accusing him of just looking for a reason to blame her. He retorted through gritted teeth that she understood perfectly. Shaking with anger, she felt this was all his fault, thinking her peaceful life was over. She realized that just when she thought she could live peacefully, he had appeared and complicated everything again. She knew people would seize on her smallest mistakes, treating gossip like a game. They would point fingers at her again. "I've had enough of this," she declared, turning away from a surprised Chris and adding that there was nothing wrong with remarrying. Chris asked if she was really considering marrying Mark, but she just said she was tired of being alone. He reminded her that she of all people should know that marriage couldn't save her, asking if she'd forgotten how she ended up in her current situation. With a faint smile, she said that just having someone to lean on would be enough, believing Mark would be a decent and reliable husband. Standing alone by the large window, she admitted to herself that deep down, she was lonely too. Chris watched her with a pained and conflicted expression. He and Adele stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken emotions. She hesitantly looked up at him and asked for his advice. He said that if she just needed someone to lean on, he could be that person. In a flashback, he is seen whispering something to Princess April. Back in the present, Adele turned away, telling him to just go marry the princess. He froze, calling her name Adele. She coldly thanked him for the invitation, but told him to leave now and not to show up uninvited again. Chris was left speechless. She watched from a window as he left through the gate. Turning from the window, her expression hardened as she thought, "Yes, this will work." She sat down, thinking that pursuing things with Mark might finally put some distance between her and Chris. It would stop the rumors and allow Chris to become a royal son-in-law. She tried to convince herself she would be fine without him. She thought about how she had survived worse things on her own. An image of heavy chains locking an iron-barred window flashed in her mind. She shook off the thoughts, telling herself to pull it together and focus on work to clear her chaotic mind, remembering the large dessert order from the palace. She started to call for Tanya to get flour from the cellar, but stopped, realizing the room was empty. Oh, right. She remembered Tanya hadn't come home yet, but recalled her friend's smiling face, saying she'd be back soon. Since Tanya would be a while, Adele realized she'd have to go to the cellar herself. She clutched her chest, filled with dread at the thought of setting foot in the cellar again. Boots creaked on the old wooden floorboards. Hating the musty smell, she cautiously made her way toward the dark cellar. Holding only a single candle, she stared into the oppressive darkness of the cellar stairs, a chill running down her spine. A memory hit her, a cruel voice announcing, "From now on, this cellar is your room." The person had called her Lady Oswald. Memories flooded back, being told she would only get one candle and must eat whatever the Marquis left for her. She remembered the cruel whispers that mocked her as the Cellar Lady and the puppet Marchioness. She shivered. Back in the present, her hand trembled on the doorknob, thinking in terror that she had to get out of there. A sudden, sharp sound made her jump, her eyes widening in fear. She saw bells hanging on the fence and wondered if an animal was trapped. The bells rang from all directions at once, and a terrifying thought struck her. Someone was doing this on purpose. Suddenly, the bells stopped, and the cellar fell into an unnerving silence. A man's voice roared for the lady to come out and stop hiding like a rat, making her gasp in terror. She instantly recognized the voice. It was Viscount Eaton. He laughed maniacally, threatening to break it himself. In a blind panic, she slammed the door shut. Trying to lock it, he pounded on the door, taunting her for hiding in the cellar. He issued a cold ultimatum: open the door by the count of 3, or his friends would break it down and things would get ugly. He began to count. 1. Adele was frozen in fear. The Viscount screamed at her to shut up from outside the door. With a loud crash, a powerful kick splintered the wood, breaking the door open. Her heart hammered as 3 menacing figures appeared at the top of the stairs, ready to descend. The Viscount sneered with a sinister laugh. "Well, we meet again, my lady." The scene shifts to a carriage traveling through a starlit forest at night. Inside, Chris's expression was grim and distant. He was lost in thought. The person next to him noticed Chris's low spirits, thinking the commander had been in a bad mood ever since leaving the Marchioness's house, and wondered if they had fought. The image of Mark kissing the back of Adele's hand replayed in Chris's mind. His thoughts turned dangerous as he wondered if he should just get rid of him. His subordinate, startled by the silent threat, cried out, "Commander, what are you saying?" Chris changed the subject, asking about Viscount Eaton's recent activities. His aide reported that new information had just come in. The aide revealed that Eaton had been seen in a tavern with a group of thugs, possibly plotting something. The sound of ringing bells flashed through his mind, connecting the pieces of the conspiracy. Chris placed a finger to his lips, his eyes sharp and perceptive as he realized something was wrong. He suddenly understood they had already made their move. The scene rushed toward Adele's house. Back in the cellar, Viscount Eaton kicked the door off its hinges. He advanced with a twisted smile, telling Adele he was here to settle an old score. "Stay away from me," she screamed, backing away in terror. Mustering her courage, she bluffed, warning him that the Viscount would arrive any moment and would never forgive him if he dared to touch her. With a defiant glare, she ordered him to get lost if he valued his life. The thugs hesitated, one of them asking what the Viscount had to do with this. The Viscount snapped, refusing to believe what he considered a lie meant to humiliate him. He sneered, roaring, "You gonna pay today?" His accomplices nodded in agreement, getting ready to act. She smelled oil, and her eyes widened in horror as she realized they were going to burn the house down. No, she refused to be a sitting duck and quickly drew a hidden dagger from a thigh holster. She desperately yelled for them to stop and threw the dagger. The Viscount cried out in surprise, clutching his bleeding, slashed arm and cursing as he recognized the damn dagger. She held her ground with the knife, warning them to back off. The men were momentarily stunned by her ferocity. Her hand was trembling, knowing she couldn't fight them all, but she hoped to injure one and create an opening to escape. One of the thugs started to mock her for trembling, but was cut off by a heavy blow from behind. The thug staggered and fell, and Adele stared in shock at what was happening behind him. A polished leather shoe planted itself firmly on the fallen man's back as a calm voice commented, "Pathetic as ever." A savior had arrived. Chris coldly asked if it really took 3 men to handle one woman. The thugs exclaimed his name, the Viscount, while Adele whispered, "Chris." Chris advanced chillingly, cane in hand, reminding Viscount Eaton that he had already given him a very clear warning. Chris issued a chilling warning with an icy gaze. "Don't play with fire." The memory hit Viscount Eaton hard as he realized with horror that the person who had knocked him out that day might have been the Viscount. His mind raced as he realized the voice he'd heard must have belonged to the Count. The memory sharpened. The Viscount had grabbed him from behind, repeating the same terrifying warning. He had given an insidious smile, threatening that next time it wouldn't be as simple as just passing out. Now he remembered everything and tried to argue he only meant to scare her. His excuse was cut short by the sound of sword being drawn. Chris's sword landed on the floor, the tip inches from the terrified man's leg. As the sharp tip rested ominously against his shoe, he began to tremble all over, tears streaming down his face. The Viscount broke down, falling to his knees and begging for mercy. Chris coldly suggested he should be begging the Marchioness, finally addressing him as Viscount Eaton. Viscount Eaton threw himself at Adele's feet, confessing his sins and pleading for forgiveness, blaming his actions on being drunk. Hiding the knife behind her back, Adele nervously ordered him to never appear before her again. He hastily agreed. Chris sheathed his sword as the other 2 men dragged the disgraced Viscount away. As they were being led away, one of the Viscount's accomplices was still wondering what had just happened. In the dim room, Chris and Adele stood alone in a somewhat awkward atmosphere. Chris broke the silence, asking if she thought he let them off too easily, calling the whole affair uninteresting. He turned his attention to the Marchioness, calling her name, Adele, as she sat collapsed on the floor. She looked up, her expression strained, and admitted her legs had gone numb. She timidly asked if he could help her back to her room, a request that seemed to surprise him. But instead of helping her walk, he effortlessly swept her up into his arms. Telling her there was no need to walk, he'd carry her. Adele blushed, thinking how she had just pushed him away, yet now felt so safe in his arms, her heart racing. Chris looked down at her and said he was going to put her on the bed now. He gently placed her on the bed, leaning over her for a moment. Their eyes met, and the air was thick with unspoken tension. Adele lay on the bed, flustered and blushing from the intimate moment. He leaned in again, making her nervously ask what he was doing. "Wait, Chris," she stammered, watching him get closer. He gently took her hand, and she was clearly surprised by the contact. As he moved suddenly closer, she turned her face away, blushing furiously. Seeing her reaction, he let out a soft chuckle. He sat at the foot of the bed and told her to get some sleep, but she admitted she was too shaken to rest. He offered her a glass of wine, but she sensibly refused, saying it would upset her on an empty stomach. When he offered to get her some food, she thanked him but said she really couldn't eat right now. He stood up abruptly, startling her. "Chris," she called out, a hint of panic in her voice. She nervously asked if he was leaving, and he paused to look back, a gentle, reassuring smile on his face. He returned with a tray, explaining that he'd had his men clean up the scene and had found a pie for her. He insisted she take a bite, joking that she was so skinny he could hear her bones rattling. She protested, denying she was that weak. "You are weak," he said, cutting off her argument by feeding her a piece of pie, adding that a single blow could break her bones. He teased her, asking if she was grateful enough to want to repay him. "Hey, Chris," she protested with her mouth full. He leaned in with a sly look, asking if she would do him a small favor. Thinking he had indeed helped her a lot, she agreed to help if she could and asked what he needed. He leaned back in his chair and told her with a confident smile that he needed a place to stay for a while. She froze mid-chew, trying to process the stunning request. "What?" she exclaimed, nearly dropping the tray. "You mean you want to live here?" He calmly replied that was exactly it. He explained he would soon be in charge of the Imperial Guard and needed a place close to the palace, but the house he'd found needed repairs. Adele shot up, reminding him she had said she didn't want to get involved with him. He waved a hand, promising to make sure that man of hers wouldn't get the wrong idea. She clarified it wasn't him she was worried about, but the princess and what would happen if another incident like tonight occurred. Chris correctly guessed she carried a dagger because she felt unsafe and she couldn't deny it. The terrifying image of the house on fire flashed in her mind, and she realized it would have become a reality if Chris hadn't returned. A thought suddenly struck her. How did Chris know to come back? He should have been long gone by now. She asked how he knew she was in trouble, to which he just coolly replied, "Well, I have good hearing." She realized it was a secret between them and was touched that he remembered after all this time. She offered him a piece of the apple pie, but he coldly refused, saying it was made for someone else. She explained she was just trying to recreate her mother's recipe and wanted to invite him over when she perfected it. He just stared at her, making her feel flustered, and she said he didn't have to believe her. He watched her intently, considering her heartfelt explanation. He leaned in and asked if she was really going to kick him out, reminding her she still owed him a favor. He flashed a killer smile, persuasively calling her name. "Come on, Adele." She caved immediately, agreeing to let him stay temporarily, because as she admitted to herself, who could say no to that smile? He cheekily promised he would move out as soon as his new place was fixed, even if she begged him to stay. She took a sip of the milk and was surprised by the taste, wondering if he had added sugar just for her. The gesture reminded her of the sweet milk her mother used to make to help her sleep as a child. She realized it was a secret between them and was touched that he remembered after all this time. She offered him a piece of the apple pie, but he coldly refused, saying it was made for someone else. She explained that she was just trying to recreate her mother's recipe and wanted to invite him over when she perfected it. He just stared at her, making her feel flustered, and she said he didn't have to believe her. He watched her intently, considering her heartfelt explanation. He suddenly leaned forward, opening his mouth expectantly. This left her completely baffled. He teased that since he had fed her, it was only fair for her to feed him. Good grief, she retorted that he had shoved it in her mouth like medicine, not fed her, and called him childish. He ignored her protests and leaned over to take a bite of the pie directly from her fingertips. She was startled by his bold move. He slowly licked the lingering sweetness from her fingertips, his eyes never leaving leaving hers. Holding her hand, he admitted the pie was even better than he had expected. Her heart pounded, and she quickly turned her head away, stammering that she was glad he liked it. She claimed the milk was making her sleepy and announced she was going to lie down. He offered to stay until she fell asleep, but she nervously refused, thanking him through her racing heart. He said he would have his things moved over soon, and she hesitantly agreed. Lying in bed, she wondered if living with Chris was a good idea, and if she could hide her growing feelings for him. The camera focused on his elegant figure as her heart continued to race. He leaned down and gently kissed her cheek, cupping her face in his hand. Her face instantly turned crimson, her eyes wide with shock. He softly mentioned the pie she made for him, stirring a faint memory of her younger self giving bread to a shy little Chris. He whispered that he was leaving, his face close to hers. As the door clicked shut, Adele shot up in bed, completely dumbfounded. She clutched the sheets, flushed and bewildered, wondering if any of that had really just happened. The scene shifted to a grand and sinister church under a dark, starry sky. The darkness seemed to dissolve as the scene changed. Inside the church, Viscount Eaton was gagged and tied to a chair, while Chris stood before him, arms crossed in a judgmental stance. The Viscount struggled desperately, tears of fear streaming down his face. Chris's voice was ice cold as he told the Viscount he should have taken his warning more seriously. The camera lingered on Chris's cold, merciless expression, emphasizing his deadly promise. With a scrape of metal, Chris drew his sword. It flashed in the light, and the Viscount let out a terrified scream. The gag was sliced away, and he gasped for air, trembling in utter terror. He desperately begged the Viscount for mercy, but Chris coldly retorted, "Oh, did I promise you that?" Chris advanced slowly, warning him not to tell a single lie when answering his questions. He tapped the Viscount's cheek with the flat of his blade. It was an utterly casual threat. Chris promised with a chilling smile that if he lied, this sword would gut him. The Viscount completely broke down, wailing in terror. Chris questioned him as to why he was harassing the Marquise, and the trembling Viscount confessed it was because she had rejected his marriage proposal, which he had made before her husband's funeral had even concluded. The Viscount broke down, tearfully admitting that the truth was he had always been fond of her. Chris narrowed his eyes, connecting the dots, and pressed him on whether he had poisoned the Marquis to get her. The Viscount furiously denied it, yelling that everyone knew the Marquise had poisoned her own husband, but Chris scoffed at this, dismissing it as a rumor with no proof. The Viscount insisted it was true, that she had fed it to her husband with her own hands. She fed him every single meal. Chris's expression grew grim as he processed this new information. The Viscount explained that the Marquis was actually an invalid, and she had to care for him day and night, a secret that was kept to preserve the family's reputation. Chris realized with a somber expression that the title of Marquise was all she had ever truly possessed. Her tragic past was unveiled. She had been cruelly nicknamed the Cellar Lady because she was confined there after her marriage, wed to a half-dead Marquis merely to serve as his attendant. Chris now understood that her father, Count Grills, had known about all of this, and that the title Marquise was just a more pleasant term for maidservant. The Viscount revealed the shocking truth. It was her own father who had first approached the Oswald family, about to make the deal. Chris scornfully recalled her father boasting that Adele was living a good life, now realizing he had sold his daughter for money without a second thought. He gritted his teeth in anger, thinking, "Is this the life you chose after leaving me, Adele?" The still-bound Viscount nervously commented that Chris seemed to know a great deal about the Oswald family, then claimed they were distant relatives on his mother's side. A cold certainty gleamed in Chris's eyes as he called him out publicly. "But you lied to me, didn't you, Viscount Eaton?" The Viscount struggled in a panic, swearing he had told him everything he knew. Chris pointed out the fatal flaw in his story. If he truly believed the Marquise was a poisoner, he would never have proposed to her. Cornered and terrified, the Viscount could only stammer, while Chris demanded to know who really killed the Marquis. Without waiting for an answer, Chris pressed the cold blade of his sword against the Viscount's throat. "I will not ask a second time," Chris warned, his voice sending a chill down the Viscount's spine. "It was Stone!" The Viscount shrieked in sheer terror, finally breaking under the pressure. "Stone!" Chris pressed, confirming he was the late Marquis's eldest son. As the terrified Viscount nodded in confirmation, he spilled everything. Stone was seen arguing with the Marquis on the day of his death, and it was Stone who spread the rumor that Adele was the murderer, despite her having cared for the Marquis with genuine devotion. Stone, of course, Chris murmured, realizing that with his father's death, Stone would automatically gain a seat on the Council of Elders. It all made sense, but a new question formed in his mind. If Stone was the real culprit, why did Adele remain silent? He couldn't understand. After everything that family had put her through, what was she holding on to? The Viscount, thinking his confession had saved his life, trembled and pleaded with Chris to spare him. Chris cut the ropes, freeing the Viscount's hands. Sheathing his sword, Chris ordered him to leave Greenhill at once. But the Viscount glared, his mind consumed with thoughts of revenge for this humiliation. Driven by rage, the Viscount grabbed the broken chair and swung it at Chris's back. Chris caught the Viscount's arm in midair, and the latter staggered back in shock, wondering how it was possible. Chris stood before him with a look of disdain as the Viscount screamed in pain, desperately telling him to stay back. The scene shifts to a tranquil church tower under the moonlight. A foot, covered in dirt and bruises, stepped onto the stone floor. It was Chris, shirtless and covered in grime, looking exhausted as he ran a hand through his hair. His aide-de-camp rushed over to hand him a cloak, and Chris gave his orders. Investigate the cause of Marquis Oswald's death, and investigate Stone Oswald. Also, pack a few of my things, Chris added as he put on the cloak, and have them sent to Adele's house. His aide-de-camp stared at him in disbelief, utterly bewildered by his commander's sudden decision. The aide-de-camp voiced his concern, reminding Chris that it was winter and living under the same roof with her could lead to irreversible consequences. Chris revealed his true mission. He was there on the Emperor's orders to retrieve a blank, signed document from her, which left the aide-de-camp stunned. Chris walked past his dumbfounded subordinate, confirming, "That's right, I told you I don't like traitors." The aide-de-camp watched him go, thinking that for a man who said such things, the commander became unusually sentimental whenever the Marquis was involved. The aide-de-camp called out to his commander and hurried to follow as they descended the stone steps. A chaotic memory flashed. A voice called out Adele's name, warning her to stay away from the bloody scene. A crowd had gathered in the dark forest, horrified by the massacre, and someone asked what kind of beast could have done this. A young Adele stood frozen, her face obscured by shadows, as she whispered "Mama" before a horrific pool of blood. Adele woke with a start in her bed, clutching the white sheets, beads of sweat dotting her forehead from the nightmare. She sat up, relieved to realize it was only a dream. To calm her nerves, she poured herself a glass of red wine. Taking a sip of the wine, she lamented that she had been just like that as a child, and now, she thought heavily, she was just a wretched adult who needed alcohol to fall asleep. Adele sat alone in the dim room, lost in thought as her mind drifted back to the past. With a soft click, she opened a small wooden drawer. She took out a hidden scroll. Her bandaged fingers carefully untied the delicate red string binding the old document. She unrolled the scroll, revealing it to be a blank document bearing the Emperor's signature, which she had taken when she fled the Oswald estate 8 years ago. Holding the document of immense power, she quietly contemplated its true purpose. The scene shifts to a peaceful morning at her quaint country cottage. A red-haired maid burst in frantically, shouting "My lady," and telling her it was no time to be sleeping. Adele sleepily rubbed her eyes and asked the maid, Tanya, what all the commotion was about, but Tanya insisted that she get up right now. Adele looked through the window to see a group of men in matching cloaks gathered in her yard. Tanya confirmed that there was a large crowd outside, leaving Adele utterly bewildered. The men began to unload materials with professional efficiency, preparing for a major project. They were already getting busy, nailing new security bars onto her windows. A cheerful man named Sir Zimmer called out, asking where she wanted the new chandelier installed, leaving Adele speechless. She stormed into the chaotic scene, demanding Sir Zimmer explain why they were trespassing and renovating her house without permission. Sir Zimmer seemed confused, explaining that since the commander would be staying there, he had assumed the renovations were approved. But Adele, furious, said that no one had mentioned anything about it. Sir Zimmer looked a bit flustered and apologized for overstepping, saying he just wanted to make the commander more comfortable, which caught both Adele and Tanya off guard. He asked with a broad smile if they could at least finish the second floor for the commander, promising to restore everything to its original state after he leaves. Moved by his earnestness, and with Tanya snickering beside her, Adele relented, telling him to do as he pleased. As he bowed gratefully, Adele covered her face with her hand, thinking he was just as strange as his commander. Tanya asked her why she had agreed, but Adele explained that while the house was old, it was her home, and she didn't want strangers altering it as they pleased. However, she admitted to herself, the most important thing was, she finally snapped, screaming that she absolutely hated the floral wallpaper, to which Tanya enthusiastically responded that it was indeed tacky. Just then, Chris appeared in his full uniform, taking in the chaotic scene and asking what was happening. He got straight to the point, looking directly at Adele to ask for Zimmer's whereabouts. The scene shifts to the renovated house, where Chris has been briefed on the situation. His gaze turned cold as he asked Sir Zimmer if he was simply carrying out his duties. Sir Zimmer confirmed that his duty was to ensure the comfort of his lord. He explained that since Chris was staying there, he felt it was only natural to fix things up, but Chris remained unmoved. Chris said he must return the favor, which sent a chill down Adele's spine as she and Tanya frantically whispered about whether they needed to intervene. To her horror, Chris drew his sword. She was certain he was going to kill Zimmer. Adele rushed in front of Zimmer to protect him. This took Zimmer by surprise. In a panic, she lied and shouted that she was the one who had ordered him to renovate the house. Chris raised an eyebrow and asked if the tacky floral wallpaper was also her idea, which she reluctantly admitted. Chris turned to Zimmer for confirmation, but Zimmer quietly denied it. Adele glared at him, trying to get him to play along, but Zimmer refused to lie, insisting that wasn't what happened. When Chris asked why she was covering for him, she yelled that life was precious and Zimmer was only trying to help. Zimmer clarified that the commander's punishment was simply to have him polish his sword. Adele blinked, realizing the whole thing had been a massive misunderstanding. She covered her face in embarrassment, laughing nervously and muttering that she should have known. Her demeanor shifted in an instant, and with an overly sweet smile, she ordered all of them to get out. Zimmer warned the commander. Her wrath was a force to be reckoned with. Adele, going berserk, ordered them to tear everything down as Tanya tried to stop her. That night, Adele worked late by candlelight, worried about missing a delivery deadline. She decided to pull an all-nighter, stretching her tired neck. A thought suddenly struck her. She had forgotten the flowers. Her heart sank as she remembered they were still in the creepy cellar. She decided to get them herself, glancing at the sleeping Tanya and deciding not to wake her after such a tiring day. Elsewhere, Chris was adjusting his formal attire, telling someone unseen not to wait up for him. Back at the house, Adele suddenly felt a wave of unease, a strange premonition. A worrying thought crossed her mind, accompanied by a vision of Chris with a beautiful, blonde-haired princess. He couldn't be spending the night with her, could he? A sly, knowing smile appeared on Chris's face. Adele snapped back to reality, wondering what on earth she was thinking. Her train of thought was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Chris. He asked her why she was still up so late. A startled Adele asked why he was back when he said he wouldn't be, but he calmly clarified that he had only said he might not return. He loosened his collar, and the tension in the room grew thick. Adele stared at him, her face flushing at a complete loss. Her hand tentatively reached out toward his. Mustering her courage, she softly called his name. She took his hand and looked up at him with determination. Flustered by her bold move, Chris stammered, "What is it?" She looked at him with a sweet smile, holding his hand gently. He turned his face away, his face bright red. He curtly refused. She didn't give up, leaning in with sparkling eyes and asking him to help her knead dough. She continued to plead with him, asking to do it together. He finally relented, grabbing her by the wrist. He agreed to help, but with one strange condition, to stop saying do it together. Confused, she asked what was wrong with asking for help with baking, then sighed and told him to forget it. Her mood brightened instantly as she excitedly grabbed his hand to get started. A heavy bag of flour landed on the table. Adele explained that she was glad for his help and told him to follow her lead on how to knead the dough. As she worked the dough, she reminded him that he used to watch her do this as a child, so it should come back to him quickly. She began her explanation, starting with the flower. Her eyes twinkled as an idea came to her. She asked Chris for a favor. Could he find a hair tie in her apron, and tie up her hair for her? He was taken aback, but she explained that her hands were covered in flour, and it was too much trouble to wash them now. He reluctantly went to help, wondering why he was doing this, and telling himself it didn't need to be perfect. He fumbled in her apron pocket, thinking to himself that he was a warrior who had taken heads, yet had absolutely no experience as a hairdresser. He pulled out a worn-out ribbon, thinking it looked awful and was about to fall apart. After putting on his glasses, Chris told her to throw the old thing away, but she insisted it was still usable and that it felt like it belonged to her. As he helped tie her hair, he advised her not to get attached to meaningless things, though he inwardly questioned his own words. As his fingers brushed through her hair, she told him it carried years of precious memories. He paused, captivated by her, as she confessed that the longer she owned something, the more attached she became to it. The atmosphere between them grew heavy, and he looked at her with an unreadable expression. He leaned closer to her and asked the question that had plagued him for a decade. "Why did you leave me?" he whispered in her ear as he finished tying the ribbon. "If you can't even part with a ribbon, how could you part with me, Adele?" He cornered her against the counter, demanding an answer. She weakly repeated the old excuse about wanting to become a noble. He cut off her excuse. That's simply calling her name. He held her tightly, asking what she was really hiding from him. He lifted her chin, looking directly into her eyes, and asked the question that had tormented him. "Did you really kill the Marquis?" She met his intense gaze, her own question filled with vulnerability. "Don't you hate me?" He admitted that he had been angry, had even hated her, but his tone softened as he said they were just children back then. Adele lowered her head, unable to respond. Finally, she turned her face away and confessed, "I didn't kill the Marquis." "So it really was Stone," he concluded, and she gave a solemn nod, confirming his suspicion. His frustration erupted as he demanded to know why she took the fall. He offered to clear her name, but she told him it was all right, insisting she was never punished for it. She said it was all in the past, but he pressed on, wanting to know why she was protecting Stone. He asked the question he had been dreading. "Do you have feelings for him?" He laid out all his fears, asking if it was because of her feelings for Stone that she endured the abuse, stayed silent about the murder, and allowed the rumors to spread. "Chris," she cut him off sharply. The mood shifted abruptly as she grabbed his face, pulling at his cheeks and asking if he was looking for a fight. A light-haired man listened as a woman insisted he was just imagining things. Adele scoffed. "Me have feelings for that guy? Oh, please," she said with a look of disgust that the mere thought of him gave her goosebumps. She explained how awful he had been to her, hoping he would never return from the Orbis Kingdom. The man wondered if Chris had gone to Orbis just to frame Adele for the Marquis' murder. He looked her straight in the eyes and asked, "Do you really want him to disappear forever?" As she looked back at him in silence, her defiant expression faded. After a tense moment, she turned her face away with a slight smile and said, "No, it's all right." The man changed the subject back to baking, and the scene faded into a beautiful, starry sky. Morning arrived. The red-haired maid woke up and stretched. She walked through the house, wondering how many people she needed to prepare food for. She realized Count Weiss hadn't come home. She paused and sighed, thinking it was a shame that nothing had happened between him and her lady. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks, completely at a loss. Her eyes widened in surprise when she found Adele and Chris sleeping peacefully together at the kitchen table. The maid couldn't believe her eyes, stunned by the romantic sight. Her face bright red, she frantically backed away from the doorway. Just then, a man in a blue cloak appeared behind her and cheerfully wished her a good morning. She quickly reached out to cover his mouth, muffling his greeting. She frantically gestured for him to be quiet, asking what was going on and demanding to know where the commander was. She whispered her speculation. She thought the commander and her lady had spent the night together. The man blushed and asked the crucial question. With their clothes on, Chris, oblivious to the peeping toms at the door, began to stir. The scene shifts to a carriage traveling down a country road. Chris, now in formal attire, asked his aide-de-camp if he had found the document. The aide reported that he had searched the entire estate to no avail, as he was unable to enter the Marquise's bedroom. Chris considered this, deciding to have the staff search her bedroom this time. The aide-de-camp simply acknowledged the order, and the two fell into silence. After a moment, the aide spoke up, saying he had a question for the commander. He asked skeptically if Chris had really just kneaded dough with the Marquise all night. Chris shot him a cold glare, silencing him. ordering him not to say another word. The aide-de-camp sat in a tense, awkward silence. He muttered to himself that Chris had said her scent was irresistible, and if they had truly only needed dough, that in itself was a problem. Chris warned him, "If I hear your inner thoughts again, this will be your grave." The aide-de-camp, Zimmer, insisted he had great respect for him, saying that even a eunuch would be impressed by that level of self-control. Having had enough, Chris abruptly drew his sword and smashed it down, shattering the table and finally silencing Zimmer. Back in the kitchen, the red-haired maid told Adele she was shocked that a man with such a cold aura would need to knead dough all night. Adele admitted she was surprised too, adding that she did have to pester him to get him to agree. The maid leaned in and asked if they had only kneaded dough. "Of course," Adele stammered nervously. "What else would we be doing in a kitchen?" The maid, Tanya, said with a mischievous grin. A flustered Adele claimed it was too hot and rushed to open the window. She rushed to the window, fanning her flushed cheeks. She let out a long sigh, trying to compose herself. She remembered Chris gently calling her name, telling her she didn't have to bear everything alone anymore. He had urged her not to keep things bottled up, and she recalled thinking that she had never heard his voice sound so gentle. In her memory, he had leaned in close to her as she was falling asleep, and she wondered if it had only been a dream. He had promised to make sure she would never have to draw her dagger again, before wishing her a good night and kissing her on the forehead. She remembered the sweet, warm feeling of that moment. Standing by the window, she clutched her chest, thinking it must have been a dream, right? The scene cuts back to Chris in the carriage, who turned his head as someone called his name. A stunned Adele pointed at Chris, demanding to know why he was here when he had said he would be right back. He calmly presented his entourage, introducing his personal staff and his butler, Henry. As the butler formally greeted her, a flustered Adele just sweated and fidgeted, managing only a weak hello in return. She pulled him aside and whispered that this looked less like a temporary stay and more like he was moving in permanently. He clarified that he would take them with him once his house was built, so that she wouldn't be burdened. As she groaned in frustration, he simply shrugged and said he didn't like being uncomfortable. Adele retorted that he could have at least told her first. He smoothly changed the subject, asking if she was going to the princess's tea party. She confirmed warily and asked why. "No reason," he said with a smug smile, leaving her completely baffled. He gave her a knowing, mysterious look, clearly plotting something. Elsewhere, Tanya and Mia marveled at Adele's transformation, exclaiming that she looked so beautiful she was like a different person. Dressed in an elegant gown and sparkling jewels, Adele felt a bit awkward but was undeniably beautiful. Her maids gushed with compliments, agreeing that the famous gowns from House Sinnel were indeed gorgeous. Tanya wondered how the Count had managed to get such a high-class gown, and Mia revealed that he had bought the designer's entire collection. Adele recalled Chris telling her to wear it for the sake of her reputation, still shocked that he had spent so much money on her. Tanya excitedly announced it was time for makeup, but Adele cringed and begged her to stop. She quickly told Mia she would go as she was, joking that she couldn't risk looking more beautiful than the princess. When the maids agreed, Adele breathed a sigh of relief, though they looked a little disappointed. Tanya suddenly produced a beautifully wrapped box, announcing that she had packed the desserts for the palace. "Perfect," Adele said, her confidence restored. Little Mia cheered her on from below. The butler, Henry, respectfully informed her that the carriage was waiting. As she picked up the dessert box, she thought how strange it was to have a butler. Henry then presented another gift, saying it was from Count Weiss. Her maids watched from behind, their eyes filled with excitement and anticipation. Henry handed her an umbrella, thoughtfully reminding her that it might rain. Later, a blushing Adele was touched by his thoughtful gesture. Once in the carriage, her maid eagerly urged her to open the gift immediately. She opened the small box, a look of recognition on her face. It was a hair ribbon, her maid exclaimed, noting how expensive and lovely it looked. A memory of a young Chris telling her to throw away her old ribbon flashed through her mind, and she realized he had remembered after all this time. Tying the new ribbon in her hair, she couldn't suppress the happy blush spreading across her face. Suddenly, the joyful moment was violently shattered by the image of a breaking teacup. A cold dread washed over her as she looked down. There was blood on her finger. Blood dripped from the cut on her finger, her peaceful mood now completely ruined. The scene shifts to the glittering exterior of the imperial palace. A title card introduces the lively princess of the Kalim Empire, April Valencia. Adele arrived at the party with grace and composure, with Tanya following behind her. Princess April complimented her stunning appearance, while the other ladies marveled at her one-of-a-kind house sinnel gown. Adele held her head high, basking in the praise, as the ladies acknowledged that her gown was indeed exceptional. The princess then introduced two other guests, Sierra, the daughter of the late Marquis Oswald, and her relative, Lady Hans. Adele greeted the newcomers, dealt with a polite and elegant greeting. Sierra tearfully thanked the princess for the invitation, claiming the recent rumors had been painful for both her and her stepmother, who she insisted was precious to her. The princess was completely moved by Sierra's kindness, but Adele remained unmoved. As Sierra brought out her own desserts, Adele moved first, presenting her creation to the princess. The princess was delighted, exclaiming that she had heard Adele's desserts were wonderful. Meanwhile, Sierra looked completely stunned. "It is my honor," Adele said, shooting a triumphant glance at her rival. Sierra visibly recoiled, resentful at having been upstaged. She thought dismissively that Adele could enjoy her little moment of glory, but a dark thought ominously declared it wouldn't last for long. Later, the ladies raved about Adele's cookies, saying it was a shame that only they could enjoy them. Sierra, seeing an opportunity, insidiously suggested that they invite Count Weiss. The princess clapped her hands, thinking it was a brilliant idea. She immediately ordered an attendant to fetch the count, but the attendant returned to report that Count Weiss was currently in a meeting with the emperor. It seemed that plan was a complete bust. At the garden party, Marquise Oswald sipped her tea quietly, lost in thought. A beautiful blonde girl in a pink dress gazed adoringly at a tall, silver-haired man. Meanwhile, a blonde woman named Sarah sneered, wondering about her mother's intentions for being there. A woman named Lady Hans called out a greeting to Lady Oswald, as Sarah watched with a cunning smile. Lady Hans raised her cup, about to share her recent news, but instead, she accidentally spilled the dark red tea on the Marquise's dress, offering a false apology as the blonde princess looked on with concern. A glimpse. The Marquise Oswald said she was fine, but she knew it was no accident. A glint in the reflection of a spoon revealed the truth. Sarah was secretly sprinkling powder on the princess's dessert. A chill ran down the Marquise's spine as she realized their horrifying plan was to frame her for poisoning the princess. Grasp. Sarah played the part of a concerned daughter, telling Lady Hans to be more careful and asking for her mother's confirmation with a chilling smile. Ugh. Suddenly, a pained scream pierced the air. Shatter. The teacup fell into pieces, red liquid splashing everywhere. Drip drop. The Marquise looked down at her hand, cut and bleeding from the cup she had just crushed. The princess rushed over in a panic, asking if she was all right and wanting to call for a doctor. Drip. As the spilled tea soaked her shoe, Adele Oswald had a brilliantly wicked idea. Lift. She raised her leg with a triumphant smirk and commanded for Sarah to take off her shoe. Sarah was stunned, but the Marquise calmly explained that her hand was hurt and her foot was wet, silently challenging her stepdaughter. Twitch. Trapped by her own act of being a filial daughter, Sarah had no choice but to reluctantly agree. Slip. Sarah was forced to kneel in front of everyone and remove her mother's shoe. Plop. Thank you, dear, the Marquise said, suppressing a laugh. The completely oblivious princess praised their charming mother-daughter bond, so the Marquise added that Sarah would even give her a foot massage. Flinch. She continued to lavish praise, complimenting Sarah's perfect fingers as being the best for massages. Sarah fumed, wondering what lies she was spinning for the final blow. The Marquise suggested Sarah give the princess a foot massage too, leaving her stepdaughter speechless and flustered. Sarah tried to refuse, claiming it would be rude to touch her highness. Smile. But the princess was all for it, eager to experience Lady Sarah's famous skills firsthand. The other ladies at the party chimed in, calling it a wonderful opportunity for Sarah to show off her talent. Scrape grit. As another guest moved her chair for a better view, Sarah gritted her teeth and finally relented. The ladies gathered around as Sarah knelt at the princess's feet, with someone even complimenting her beautiful hands. Rub. As Sarah reluctantly began the massage, the camera pans to the dessert plates on the table. Gurgle. Recoil. Suddenly, a hand clutched a stomach, and a loud gurgle signaled that something was very wrong. Pale and shocked, Lady Hans wondered what was wrong with her stomach. Turn. Sarah turned to her, asking if she was all right, but Lady Hans was clearly confused. Sarah asked the princess for permission to take Lady Hans for a walk, and the unsuspecting princess agreed. Gurgle. As the suffering Lady Hans was helped away, the Marquise calmly sipped her tea, telling her not to be embarrassed. She recalled her brilliant move. While Sarah was busy massaging the princess's feet, she had switched their dessert plates. Sip. She concluded Sarah must have put a laxative in the dessert, and she smiled as she watched her stepdaughter reap what she had sown. Overhearing other nobles gossiping about Lady Hans's background, the Marquise sighed, realizing how tiring and vicious high society was. Bow. Just then, a well-dressed man bowed before the princess. Whisper. He leaned in and murmured something, making the princess recoil in surprise. Did her mother, Her Majesty the Empress, summon the Marquise Oswald? She asked. The scene changes, introducing the respected emperor of the Kalim Empire, Jan Valencia. It's explained that Jan was able to become emperor because his predecessor died suddenly in a war, bypassing the nobles who opposed him. With the previous emperor dead and his son still young, his younger brother Jan seized the crown and expanded the empire through ruthless conquest. Behind his every victory was the stoic Count Weiss, whose investiture ceremony was approaching. The emperor tells Count Weiss he is relieved to have him lead the royal guard, and Weiss humbly accepts the honor. Clink. The emperor casually changes the subject, asking when Weiss plans to finally marry his daughter, April. Frown. When the emperor suggests they officially announce the engagement at the ceremony, Weiss pushes back, asking if it's an imperial order. Click. The emperor slams his cup down, confirming he knows Weiss moved into the Marquise's house to retrieve a document for him. He warns Weiss not to do anything to hurt April, but the count coldly replies that he never promised the princess anything. The emperor retorts that he should at least pretend to love April, adding that frankly, he couldn't care less what Weiss does to the Marquise. But Count Weiss coolly strikes back, warning the emperor that if anyone becomes suspicious, it is his majesty who will be in trouble. Clench. The emperor, frustrated, grits his teeth and gives Weiss a 1-month deadline. He has 1 month to find that specific blank document and move out of the Marquise's house. The emperor issues a final, cold threat. Either succeed, or he will tell the Marquise who Weiss really is. Flinch. Weiss is clearly shaken by the threat, though his expression remains rigid. The emperor taunts him, saying that if Princess April knew his true nature, she would tremble in fear beside him. Chill. A wicked smile plays on Weiss's lips as he thinks to himself, I'm a beast who cannot control his desires. Seize. Infuriated by his insolence, the emperor grabs a heavy glass decanter from his desk. Whoosh. He hurls it directly at the count's head with murderous intent. Thud. With lightning speed, Weiss catches the decanter just inches from his face without even blinking. Grip. Crack. His eyes gleam as he tightens his grip, and the thick glass begins to spiderweb with cracks under the pressure. Shatter. The decanter explodes in his hand, leaving the emperor utterly stunned by his raw power. Drip. As blood drips from his fist, Weiss declares that he will be the one making the decisions now. Footsteps creak, slam. Weiss wishes the emperor a good night and turns to leave the fuming ruler. Ugh, grit. Left alone, the emperor seethes, cursing that Weiss has gotten too bold. Weiss's arrogant, condescending eyes linger in his mind, a blatant show of disrespect. He realizes he can't let this go. He must find a way to control him. But it hits him, that woman. He recalls Weiss's reaction when her name was mentioned and deduces that Adele Oswald must be the beast's only weakness. The scene changes, and we learn the Empress was a former commoner-born knight who fought alongside the Emperor, a fact that angers the noble elite. The Marquise faces a woman kneeling on a dirted dress, who greets her with, "Long time no see." Snap. A red-haired woman, the Empress, breaks a riding crop while sarcastically complimenting the Marquise's newfound air of luxury. Adele humbly replies that it is all thanks to the grace of the imperial family. The Empress sneers caustically, remarking that women glow when they're in love, especially when their men are rich. Adele plays dumb, nervously saying she doesn't understand what Her Majesty means. The Empress declares she despises immoral people, especially vulgar women who throw themselves at men just because they're handsome. She introduces the trembling woman, the Empress's mistress, Lady Lynette, explaining she is being punished for touching something that belongs to the Empress. Gasp! The battered and terrified mistress begs for forgiveness. The Empress orders her to be taken away. Screen drag. As the guards haul the screaming mistress away, the Empress watches Adele's reaction, her point cruelly made. Footsteps. The Empress approaches, stating bluntly that everyone knows April and Count Weiss are to be married. Flip. She threateningly grabs the ribbon on Adele's dress, pulling her close. Grit. Adele grits her teeth, trapped by the Empress's aggressive move. Tremble. She desperately thinks that her relationship with Chris is not what the Empress thinks it is. The Empress continues her intimidation, a cruel smile on her lips. Then she asks a loaded question. If Adele can't trust her, can she not even trust the Count? Adele begins to defend herself, saying that if this isn't enough to earn her trust, then she doesn't know what is. Shout. The Empress flies into a rage, screaming at Adele to watch her mouth for daring to talk back to her. But Adele holds her ground, declaring she won't let the Empress question the Count's honor. Stunned by her defiance, the Empress stumbles back, then raises the riding crop to strike. Shatter, grip. Adele squeezes her eyes shut, bracing for the impact. Crack. A sharp sound echoes in the hall. Drip. Count Weiss appears, having caught the riding crop in midair. His bleeding hand is a testament to his fury as the shocked Empress cries out his name. Chill. Adele looks up in disbelief as Chris, his eyes filled with cold rage, demands an explanation from the Empress. Clench. He tightens his grip on the weapon, his bleeding hand proof of his anger. Recoil. The Empress recoils, intimidated by his dangerous aura. Snatch. She tries to brush it off, claiming it's none of his business, but he icily replies, "This doesn't look like a conversation." Huh. Infuriated, she demands to know if he's questioning her, but he simply turns away, saying he wouldn't dare. Step. Announcing he is taking the marquise, he leads the shaken Adele away, leaving the utterly defeated Empress behind. Footsteps. The Empress watches them go, her face a mask of silent, suppressed fury. Stop. As they walk through the garden, Chris stops abruptly. A chilling thought crosses Adele's mind. Even the hero of the Empire could be brought down by a single cup of tea from the Empress. Adele leans against him, and Chris thanks her for her concern. He has a sharp, knowing smile on his face. Glare, clench. The Empress watches them leave, her face full of rage, as she mutters a chilling "so be it."